let's move on to communication.
Communication. Expression of experience in a benevolent manner.
Yes, that is, you're confused by that? I remember what it means.
Please.
It is, it kind of taps into how we were thinking about doing social media stuff and how we're thinking about doing what we're doing right now, the podcast, the idea of if we're going to communicate anything, we try and do so in a manner that is positive and contributes to the world rather than further muddies the experience that we're all having.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, in addition to, or just like to clarify positive too, I don't think like, not like fake, like if something wasn't good, like we will say it's not good. I mean, you know, but like genuine and honest.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, not trying to be a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've done that so far. There may be things where we've unknowingly contributed negativity.
Sure.
But by the virtue of that definition, we haven't known it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to be like that.
Yeah.
Next is expression with meaning and principle.
Mm-hmm.
That seems similar.
Benevolent versus meaning and principle. Yeah, I mean, one is be positive, and two is have either a message or a purpose.
Yeah.
So,
Or kind. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with the word positive right now.
I don't know.
But I feel like, yeah, but I'm sure how you mean it is how I'm thinking it. I just feel like positive can sometimes be like fake. Like if something wasn't a good experience, I feel like we've communicated that, you know, like I'd like to communicate that, but also not in a way that's like mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can think of another word other than positive right now. But the idea is with constructive energy and with intention are those first 2 points. And
right.
I don't know if those were necessarily things that we wouldn't have done otherwise, but part of writing them down is just to be able to check in on them.
Yeah. Intentional openness in encountered dialogue.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that, I mean, this is one where COVID wasn't around when we made them. So the encounters that we've had with people are just very different. Between the fact that the number of encounters may have declined, A, because of COVID, and B, because the walk takes a significant amount of time every day, maybe even more time than we anticipated, even though it's less hours maybe overall, but the motivation to get home is stronger than it might have been if we were just doing vacation walking.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that, there's also the idea that the quality of the interactions that we have is altered inherently by the fact that we're all wearing masks and there's a pandemic happening right now.
Right.
So even with those two things in mind, I think that we've tried to maintain that ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like specific examples, and the only things I can think of right now are just interactions with people on the street that normally maybe, and honestly, I forgot that we wrote this. I think it kind of comes naturally with just what we're doing, but also maybe because we wrote it, it was like in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, people that have like come up and started walking alongside of us a handful of times.
Yeah.
And like the kind of like, you know, there was one time when, forget what we were talking about, but someone like came up next to us and was like just joined in the conversation and was clearly like not quite like with it, you know, and we just were like, okay, you want to talk to it? Like,
Yeah.
sure. And like, it wasn't particularly pleasant, but it also wasn't like threatening and whatever. Like, we weren't going to like,
Yeah.
we didn't make a new friend, but like, and I think he trailed off after he like was a couple sentences and then he stopped and turned around, but like,
Well, I don't know if this is the same interaction we're thinking of or not, but there was an instance where that happened, and we tried to engage him in the conversation that he was inserting himself into, and he kind of engaged the conversation, but then was immediately looking for money from us. And those are like the hardest versions of that, because it's like, okay, well, you're not really looking to be in the moment with us right now. You're almost kind of, I mean, it almost feels like mocking in a way, because we're having a real meaningful conversation here, and you're only engaging it insofar as you're parroting words back to me so that you can use that as an opportunity to then ask me for something.
yeah, but I think there's something, I don't know. I mean, I understand. Yeah, I think it was frustrating to you. And I think that's why I said like it wasn't a particularly pleasant conversation. But I think something about just being like, if you want to talk with us, you could like, it's almost like I'm not being naive, but I'm also not being jaded.
Yeah.
And so my sort of the jaded Jessie would have just been like, okay, dude, like leave us alone, like, or like walked faster or like moved to the side or, you know, something like just not nice. And then like, not only is he not going to get the money from me, but he's also not going to be treated like a human.
Yeah.
And like, even though, yeah, he was probably mocking us, like, that's fine. Whatever he thinks of us or acts towards us that's all in his own head. Like, I don't need to take that on.
Yeah.
And so to just engage him in what like, that's me projecting and reading into him to think that he's mocking. Like, I don't need to even acknowledge that part of it. I can just pretend like he's not mocking me and like he's actually just trying to talk with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when he's asking for money, like, no, like that's also perfectly fine. Like, I don't have to give anyone money. That's not part, like, I'm open to dialogue. I'm open to talking with someone. If they want to ask for advice, I'll give them advice. If they want to like keep walking with us for a while, like that's fine.
Yep.
If at some point I happen to be taking out a granola bar for myself and I have an extra, like maybe I'll share that if he's been walking with us for an hour. But like, something about like treating someone as a human actually makes me feel fine about then declining when they're asking, you know, or sometimes we've obviously given people things, but like, I feel like giving someone the respect of humanity is way better than giving someone like
it's
a
the
dollar.
opportunity. Yeah, the opportunity to actually engage in the moment. I mean, the disappointing thing is just that it ends in that interaction, not that it like the interaction itself isn't the problem. Like, I'm happy or willing to entertain the idea that this might actually turn into some type of like further exchange. But then when it comes down to the point of like, okay, well, now I'm looking for something. I'm looking to get something from you. That's when it's like, okay, well, this is disappointing, but at least like I did engage this at a good faith level for a while.
Yeah. Well, maybe I wonder if I'm still a little bit on the jaded side of things then, because I don't really feel disappointed. Like, because I don't have any expectations. I think I must still be on the jaded side a little bit because I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you. Like, but it's very much like, I'm going to be super nice to you. I'm going to be like completely open to talk to you about whatever it is you're trying to talk to me about. But I'm also like, this is ultimately going to end only as a small, like, entertaining story for me. Like, I don't see this being like some sort of like major change
Mm-hmm.
in who I perceive this person to be. Like,
Yeah.
it's also not someone I know or like someone
Yeah.
that I need to know.
Well, I had a similar encounter this week without Jesse, where I was walking down the street and a man saw this hat that I was wearing, and he said, "I like your hat." I was like, "Thanks." And I kept walking, and then 10 to 15 seconds later, he was already a half a block away, and he came running down towards me and shouting, "You know what that reminds me of? You know what that reminds me of?" And then he was walking alongside me, and I said, and he said, "You know what that reminds me of?" I was like, "What?" And he was like, a hailstorm that we had back in the summer." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What about it reminds you of the hailstorm?" And he said, "Oh, the hailstorm a couple of, back in the summer." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, "It was up on 71st. I was on 71st when it happened." And I was like, "Oh, I don't remember that. But my girlfriend and I have been walking marathons all year, so I may have been outside during it. And I made this hat. Well, my girlfriend made this hat. We've made it together." And he got very excited about it. And then I handed him a sticker. And then we elbow bumped, like COVID bumped. But it was like this very like kind of an intimate elbow bump. Like he kind of like really leaned in on, like there was a lot of meat, a lot of forearm meat
Oh,
on this elbow bump. But he seemed very happy about the whole exchange and walked away.
yeah.
He wasn't looking for money. I don't know if I would have given him money at the time. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with asking for money. It really just kind of depends on the circumstance whether or not
Yeah.
you're going to give money or not. But the idea was that like the exchange was actually meaningful in the moment. Like it wasn't like he was looking for anything more other than to communicate to another human being that this particular instance reminded him of some other instance he had, and that sentiment was heard by
Yeah.
me.
And I think honestly that's part of why, like, that being able to have that experience makes all those other experiences that are like could be potentially disappointing not disappointing, because it's really just like practice for something that like that is so nice.
Yep.
And if you weren't sort of going around being like willing to just engage whoever's engaging you in like a kind and friendly and honest human way, then you never would have had that nice experience.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say before we move on to the next one is that I think that by doing this enough, you can see how the potential of what we're doing with respect to this specific thing is like so much bigger than what we're doing right now. Where, like, if we were just roaming the city all day with no actual mileage in mind, the level of interaction that you could have on the street would be like 10 times greater, because you could like actually be looking at people and like trying to engage them rather than just like having it happen like meteor style, like just like randomly hitting you, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that means that like at some point in our lives we would be seeking that out more, but it is cool to know that those experiences are like way more readily available on the streets than, I don't know, maybe you would expect that it was possible, but like it's even easier than you might think to like have those types of experiences.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also just think it is also just related to the idea of it there being like a practice. Like I think it's something that translates into just like all human interaction as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right, what's the next one?
Okay, next. Facilitating conversations around the project's context and beyond.
Sure. I think that we've done a reasonably good job at this. I think this is one that kind of relates to the general idea of outreach. And in that respect, I feel like I would always I could always do better. We could always do better. We saw Andrew Yang this week
Oh, we did.
on 11th Avenue and 45th Street or something like that.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
was
that sounds right.
he was out sitting on a bench with 3 people around,
Yeah.
like a lunch table bench, like one of
Like a
the
picnic table.
one of the outdoor dining spots. And there were 2 people with
Mhm.
laptops and then a third person. It was unclear if they were his staff or he was being interviewed.
Yeah.
And so we saw him, and it was like, oh, there's Andrew Yang. He had a Yang mask
Yeah,
on,
it was hard to miss him.
and so we saw him, and we were like, well, we have to say something. And so I said like, hey, good luck on the race, and
Yeah.
he like kind of got up from his I think
Did
he
he?
stood up,
Oh, really?
but
I thought he
only
just looked.
I think he stood up only to just say thank you very much, like a
Oh.
kind of like I'm
Like
going
to
to
acknowledge
acknowledge,
it in a way that was polite.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I, we did that, and what I really wanted to do was be able to have time to tell him about our project,
Right.
because I think it's relevant to what he's doing in some ways, and I'd be interested to see how that would manifest, but it didn't really feel like the appropriate time.
No, it didn't. Yeah.
And, I mean, depending on where you are mentally, any time is the appropriate time, but I certainly wasn't there mentally to be able to like somehow spin my way into whatever thing he was doing, and not only that, but like make it enticing enough what we were doing that he wouldn't
Yeah.
kind of be like, why are you in my space right now?
Yeah. Well, it's about being prepared mentally, but also like just recognizing like typical rules of etiquette. Like he was in the middle of a meeting. Like it just wasn't, there's no way that would be like polite. Like you might have been able to spin
Right.
it to a place where then like they would end up feeling like that was so fun. We must have asked them to be here. I'm glad we like paid for that tour. Like you're
It's
like such
possible.
a great actor or something. But yeah, I also just think sometimes it's just not.
So there's that degree of handling this specific point.
Right.
And then there's the when you are given the opportunity naturally to have these types of conversations, to what degree are you, communicating the project parameters?
Yeah. Well, it's not the project's parameters, it's the project's context.
Mm-hmm.
It's facilitating conversations around the project's context and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not just telling people what we're doing. That's also talking with people about things that we're learning during this time, or things that we've seen, or like it's not specifically just saying like I'm walking 26.2 miles around New York City, but also saying like, oh, I've been walking a lot and it's helped me in these ways, or I've seen all these things, or like,
Yeah.
what do you feel about these things? Like,
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. So do you think we're doing a good job?
I think we are. I think the and beyond, maybe as we like get through the next 3 months, I think we can probably just continue to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think especially with the outreach, I think specifically with people that we're meeting along the way and making a point to learn about things and share what we're doing with people that are also doing things that sort of are related in some way or another, that we're
Mm-hmm.
also like inspired by.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're doing a good job about that. I don't know if necessarily like conversations with like people we already know going into this, I don't know if I can judge that, like casual conversations when a friend like asks how it's going kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have a sort of template for facilitating like the parts of this project that I would like to share with a lot of our friends. Like, I think I'm still probably in the processing phase
Mm-hmm.
of everything we're doing. So yeah, I'd say I'd give it a higher score with like new people that we're meeting through this project than maybe with the conversations that are just like general conversations with people we already know.
Okay.
But then we're having a podcast every week. So like, and that is, I'm sure people that are listening are both new people and people we've known for a long time. So that's also part of, I mean, I don't know what the conversations beyond like that we aren't even part of. Like maybe people are talking about it and having positive experiences and taking it and doing their own things with some of the context that we're bringing. So
Right. Cool.
Okay, next. Intention choice in medium and frequency
Okay. Is this the last one?
of this
communication,
communication.
yeah.
There's one more.
Intention choice in
Medium and frequency.
right, which is to say the podcast, how many times the podcast comes out a week, the 360 videos, the social media, all that. I would say that right now the consistency is king here. This is what it's kind of gone to for me personally, which is to say there may be better mediums that could have existed for this project. And I don't know at this stage if I'd be inclined to experiment with things. I would be more interested in creating a full body of things that we've already done, you know?
Yeah, well, I also think the intention choice in medium and frequency, like for this year, and as you said earlier in this meeting, you mentioned that we're almost like in some ways just like in this whole walk as a halfway point of the project where there is probably going to be a lot that we're going to do post walk.
Right.
And so there's going to be so many more mediums that we have. Like, I don't know that I think we have made intention choices in how to communicate for this year.
Yeah.
And I don't think that changing that is necessary unless it was failing in some way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we've made the intention choice in medium. I don't think it's failing in any way that we would need to rethink it.
No.
I don't think that rethinking things in this sort of like when there's so much going on is beneficial even. I think just keeping it going as long as it's not like broken.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And for frequency, yeah, I mean I think it's good. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I think all of this stuff was, and like we did making those choices, we did talk about it a lot. And yeah, discussed like whether or not we could keep up with it, whether or not there should be more, less, whatever. And this is what we came up with. And we've tweaked things, certainly, but
Yeah. I don't know if I think there are things I maybe would have done differently in terms of exactly how we're doing the podcast and whatnot. If it would have turned into exactly what it is now, which is, I think, a lot more long form listening and considerations than maybe doing something like a live stream, which we have been doing with the other YouTube channels we're visiting, which is great. And we hope that the last season of the spring will bring more of that.
Yeah, those have been really fun.
But I've always really appreciated this format, like the long talking podcast format anyway. So, and that was kind of what we were setting out to do at the beginning of the project. So we've succeeded in doing what we were really thinking we wanted to do.
Right, and I think that the live stream for us would be really fun to play around with. I also think...
And that may well be something that you'll be seeing in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we might try it out in addition to the podcast. But I think, what we're doing right now makes sense for, especially going into this, we didn't, like, we already were figuring out learning how to use this medium.
Yeah.
And so there's only so many mediums you can like learn all at once.
Yeah.